You all know the work of charter schools is very challenging. Has anyone been able to watch season 2 of House of Cards yet? Okay. So politics is a tough business. There's no question about it. Compared to what we see in House of Cards, the life that we live is not as difficult. Let's keep that in perspective. All of you are warriors every day as leaders of charter schools, teachers of charter schools, advocates for charter schools. And it's very hard work. It's everyday grind. And then you get to come to this conference. This is the celebration. This is a time of reflection. In contrast, my life's incredibly easy. When you think about it, I go to some board meetings, I write some checks, people are nice to me. I mean, it's very, very easy, I gotta tell you. But it does give me a chance to talk with many of you and with your colleagues around the country in trying to understand more about this puzzle of charter schools. How do we succeed politically? Why is it important? Why do different constituents fight with us? Why do school districts have such a difficult time? And so I thought I would start by sharing some of those reflections with you and start with a love affair. So I fell in love 14 years ago with Roy Romer. And Roy Romer was the former governor of Colorado, very sophisticated politician. And he basically volunteered to become the superintendent of Los Angeles Public School District in June of 2000. And there was great excitement about how he was able to galvanize the philanthropic community, the political community, the business community, teachers. He had a real touch for people. And for 6 years, one of the longest runs ever in urban school districts, he put in place formative assessment and worked on professional development. He did amazing work throughout those 6 years. A lot of people contributed to that work, probably many people in this room. And then what happened is the school board changed enough that he got thrown out. And afterwards, well-intentioned people came in, Brewer and Cortinas and now Daisy, and there's almost nothing left of the work that Roy Romer did. So it's kind of a puzzle, because those are all good people. They want the best things for the district. So how is it that Governor Romer did all this work, and then 6 years later, it's all gone? Well, it started me thinking, oh, think about how hard it is to win election in LAUSD. It's a big deal, right, to win election to the school board. Well, are you going to win election and then not try to create change? No. You got to promise to your constituents you're going to create change. That's why you win election. That's why you work so hard. And so what happens in school districts which have big contested elections, so not like Palo Alto or special well-off communities, but your large districts, they're very contested elections. And the school board, new members get elected, and new members want to have something different and change, because you run on change if you're in politics. And so inevitably, the superintendent changes rapidly. So in the last 8 years, we've had 3 different ones in LA Unified, and that's not unique. That's typical across the country. And what happens then is a school district has a very hard time making long-term plans, making long-term changes, because the school board is rapidly changing, so the superintendent changes, so the top staff changes. And that is the essence of why school districts cannot get to sustained excellence. School districts are filled with good people trying to do good work, but the governance of a school district is relatively chaotic, especially in large urban districts where elections are expensive to win. And because of that turnover, they basically oscillate instead of improve. So you'll see a district will improve steadily for a couple years, and then it goes down, and then it comes up, and then it goes down. And we mistake those oscillations for real improvement. There's been some substantial improvement in New York over the last 10 years with Bloomberg and Joel Klein. The question is, how much of it will last over the next 10 years? So this political process is very disheartening, because it makes it very hard for a school district to do long-term change. Now, in contrast, Aspire today is much better than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. KIP today is much better than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And all of your organizations that are 10 years plus are experiencing the same thing. You're a learning organization. You continuously get better. I look at Netflix. Netflix is 15 years old. It's gotten better every year. So how is it that Aspire and KIP and Green Dot and Netflix and other organizations steadily get better, but school districts get better and worse and better and worse and don't really make substantial change? Well, that all comes down to governance. A charter school is generally a nonprofit, and the board members pick the new board members. It's called self-perpetuating governance. They're not elected by the general public. And because the board members pick the new board members, when you join the board of a nonprofit, you join to help. You're not necessarily going to create change. You didn't have to run an expensive election to get there. You're not trying to go from there to city council. You're just trying to help the organization. So that nonprofit, self-perpetuating governance is very healthy. And because of it, you can have leadership change, like Don Shalvey started Aspire, but James Wilcox has been running it for the last 5 years, and it's been relatively smooth and continuous improvement. Marco was not the founding CEO of Green Dot, but he's been there 7 years now, and it's continuously gotten better. And so you can have leadership turnover without radical change in direction when you have a board, a nonprofit board. And that's not only true in nonprofits, that's also true in for-profits. So for-profits are basically self-perpetuating. Board members pick new board members, and then the organizations compete. Well, if you think about it, it's also true in the military branches. Right? Remember when we used to think that it was inefficient to have an Army and a Navy and an Air Force? And by the way, the Navy's got planes, and the Army's got boats, and you know, they're all sort of overlapping, right? But in fact, each branch trains and promotes. They have their own governance. They have their own schools for developing their officers, their own theories. And then when the top of the government wants great warriors, they sometimes pick different branches. So for example, it's the Navy SEALs, remember they're the swimmers, right? That got picked for the mission to go hunt down Osama bin Laden at 11,000 feet in Pakistan. There's not a lot of sea there, not a lot of ocean there. Okay, so why do they do that? Well, that's because they're really just different branches of the military competing. And of course, when the president and the Joint Chiefs pick the Navy to do that, of course, the Air Force doubles down on their training. The Army Rangers are inflamed. Why not us? We're better than them. And they improve their training. And so this model of the Army controlling their training, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines all doing their training, separate organizations, they compete for missions, is the right way. And that's essentially like the charter school way. Or think about churches. The cardinals pick the Pope picks the cardinals. Another form of self-perpetuating governance. And if you look at all of the innovation in churches over the last 50 years, it's really impressive. The wraparound services and technology and just really amazing amounts of innovation. Because you've got all these different branches. You can call it competition, but they're really all trying to serve people's spiritual needs. Okay, but each one controls its own destiny, each church. And then they all serve the general population. And of course, political parties, the Democrats pick the Democrats, the Republicans pick the Republicans, and then they compete. So basically, every sector of our economy, politics, religion, the military, for-profits, non-profits, they've got this structure that each organization controls their own destiny, and then you compete with other organizations. Sometimes you compete very gently, like the churches compete, or the different military branches, or nonprofits and how they compete, or how universities compete. Sometimes you compete with great intensity, like Netflix versus Blockbuster, Netflix versus HBO. But the most intense is in politics. I mean, they're really trying to kill each other. okay? So you've got all different levels of competition, but the basic structure is unique. And so the fundamental problem with school districts is not their fault. The fundamental problem is they don't get to control their board. And the importance of the charter school movement is to evolve America from a system where governance is constantly changing and you can't do long-term planning, to a system of large nonprofits that develop and have great professional development and training, and they look like the breadth of, say, military branches, churches, universities, nonprofits, all trying to outdo each other to serve the children. And we're getting little glimpses of this when we look ahead, when we look at New Orleans, which is now about 90% charters. And the overall results in New Orleans across the whole city are amazing. They're rapidly rising, much faster growth than anywhere else in Louisiana, and soon going to pass the state average, which is amazing given the demographics in the state. So it's very impressive. And again, that's because they've pioneered this form where nearly all the schools are charters, organized into networks of all different sizes, some single schools, some big networks. And they all learn from each other. But the most important thing is they constantly get better. Every year, they're getting better because they have stable governance. They don't have an elected school board. And that's the real tough issue here. Now, if we go to the general public and we say, here's an argument why you should get rid of school boards, of course, no one's going to go for that. School boards have been an iconic part of America for 200 years. And so what we have to do is to work with school districts to grow steadily. And the work ahead is really hard because we're at 8% of students in California, whereas in New Orleans, they're 90%. So we got a lot of catch-up to do. We got a lot of work of adding more schools and serving children better and better. School districts would like to learn from charters. But the problem is they get a superintendent who says, let's learn this new thing that charters are doing. Maybe it's around technology. And that goes for 2 or 3 years, but the school board changes, and then that superintendent is out, and the new one comes in with a different set of ideas. And so school districts would like to learn the practices. They do in a couple of cases. But as a general rule, they're prisoner to their governance, to the elected school board changing so rapidly. And so what we have to do is just continue to grow and grow. And people say, well, what about, the kids now? I mean, we're only serving 8% of the kids. What about 92% of the kids? It's going to take 20 or 30 years to get to 90% charter kids. And the answer is, yeah, it is. It's going to take 20 or 30 years. And if we succeed over the next 20 or 30 years, that will be one of the fastest rates of change ever seen around the world for a large system. It's hard. We have to have the steady discipline of every year, more schools, better funding, better facilities access, more freedom. It's a lot of hard, steady work. But we are making great progress. And again, it's not because the people in school districts are bad. Most of them, we want to pull them into the charter school movement, where they can see what a great public school is that doesn't have the chaos inflicted by the rapid turnover of a local school board. Now, some ideas like this that take a long time, they can be frustrating. And unless you put it in perspective, it can seem like it's very daunting. So let's go back about 400 years ago. And at the time in Europe, governance was divine right of kings. That was the overall theory. Kings had a divine right to rule, and that gave them their moral authority. And along came a number of thinkers like the nutty John Locke, a Scottish minister, talking about the basis, the legitimacy of government was derived from the consent of the governed. I mean, that was a radical idea at the time when you had divine right of kings. And there was Rousseau and a lot of talk. And then in the American Revolution, finally, we have a major nation with democracy. So the thing is done after 200 years of thinking. Finally, we have democracy, consent of the governed. Only it's landed white males that can vote. It took another 50 years until Andrew Jackson for poor, unlanded white males to be able to vote. Then you have to go another 50 years to 1863, an Emancipation Proclamation, for African American males to nominally be able to vote. Then you have to go another 50 years until 1920 for women to be able to vote. And then another 50 years till the Civil Rights Movement for African Americans to vote in practice. So 400 years on a very simple idea, the consent of the governed, one person, one vote. So we human beings, it takes a lot to change us. We just have to recognize 400 years for a simple idea. Our idea is a little more complicated. You got chartering authority and regulation and testing and accountability. And so really, when I think about the last 20 years, in 1994, there was just a dozen charter schools, 10,000 students. The progress that we've made between 1994, 2004, and 2014, it's like a rocket ship compared to even basic ideas like democracy taking hold. And so you all should feel incredible about the achievement in this movement. And it is hard. I mean, we got a big political battle coming in the fall, potentially some ballot initiatives we're going to have to fight. We've got constant legislative battles. We have school district battles. We have zoning restrictions. There are very many problems. But then what's life really about? It's about making a contribution and working with great people. And how lucky can we be? We have some of the greatest people in this state here in this room. We get to work together on this epic mission for the next 20 or 30 years to grow charter school capacity, to have everyone be able to have good working conditions because they work in a good, healthy organization. And we get to do that basically in one lifetime, 20 years past, 30 years to go. Much better than having to wait 400 years. So I just want to thank all of you for the incredible work you do. It's a great journey, and we're going to do it together next 10 years, next 20, next 30, because we are relentless. Thank you, everybody.